All right. So, hey, everybody. We are getting a presentation from Raina Oloker with the state on the State Department of Colorado Public Health and Environment on the new Colorado Green Business Network. And this has potential implications for our local green business programs if we want it to. And Raina's going to talk about this exciting new launch. It's something that a number of us have been working behind the scenes on for years, and so very excited to get to this point. And so Raina will give a little overview and update of where things are at, and then we'll have a discussion on how we collectively, individually want to participate in the new Colorado Green Business Network. Raina, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Good luck with the driveway. So I'm going to share my screen here. And I know with Teams, sometimes when you share your screen, you can't see chat or anything. So if folks do have questions throughout the midst of this initial conversation, feel free to just unmute. That is totally okay with me. But I'm going to share my screen. Awesome. So basically what I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit about the way that our program works overall, and then also some of the opportunities that we're offering for partnership with regional green business programs. Because one of the things that we heard loud and clear when we started talking about redesigning our program was just the fact that we have a lot of municipalities across the state that want to have a local green business program, but don't necessarily have the initial resources to do so. So a lot of the services that we really developed to kind of almost create like a boxed sustainability program that municipalities that maybe only have a part-time FTE can just grab and run with. So that was the initial impetus for us creating kind of like a boxed set of statewide services. We also then want to provide the opportunity for more established programs to jump on board with that as well, to create a more cohesive network of green business programs across the state, similar to what California, Washington State, and several others across the country have been doing. So it's fully optional. I always want to throw that in as a disclaimer right off the bat. But we'll talk through some of the options that are available. And I'm going to start just giving you a program overview so that you know how our program works from a business perspective. So the Colorado Green Business Network is a free voluntary certification program for businesses. There's no cost associated with any of the services we offer. We're available to any Colorado organization, whether it's government organizations, nonprofits, or industry. And we're focused on supporting as well as recognizing excellence in sustainable operations. Historically, the program has been around in some capacity for about 25 years, but most recently, we've kind of evolved into the Colorado Green Business Network. So we were the environmental leadership program on the recognition side and the Colorado pollution prevention program on the technical assistance side. And what we've been doing is really just merging those two branches of industry support into one-stop shop for businesses to be able to use for the recognition side and also for the technical assistance and coaching side. So our new program structure kind of has two ways to engage with it from a business perspective. We do have what we've been calling kind of a support level, which basically means businesses will go into our system, they'll register as a business in Green Biz Tracker, which is what we're going to be using as kind of their new interface, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And the support level is kind of unscored, right? Nobody needs to apply. They don't need to submit a ton of information. It's kind of a 5-question survey to get a sense for where they're at as an organization. And at that level, there's no recognition, but they do get the technical assistance that we offer. They get connected with the community. They get access to the newsletter, to workshops, tours, to coaching. So it's a way of kind of getting folks into the program at whatever level they're at. And then we also have the recognition level. So the recognition level is for businesses once they kind of start getting projects running, they start implementing and seeing some reductions. That's when they would apply for recognition. And that is a formal application process that also will be in Green Biz Tracker. And it's a point-based system. So it kind of provides many paths to bronze, silver, or gold. And it does require annual reporting of metrics for consistency in the program. And there we provide a number of other things. So we provide recognition, we have window decals, all of the standard stuff. We do a big recognition event, usually in September of every year. We often offer our gold members mentoring and speaking opportunities. So there's kind of a lot there. And this is a list of some of the benefits of recognition that we have. A big thing that a lot of our businesses talk about is having a relationship with the state can be really valuable. They get tapped for advisory boards. They get asked to be on focus groups. They also get priority permitting and things like that from us, just because we're kind of tied in with the regulatory agencies. And then all the standard stuff that folks get from a green business program, right? Being able to tell their story, having that third-party certification can be really valuable. The other piece that I think is really unique about where our program historically has been is that we have a really strong basis for mentoring within the community. So a lot of our gold level members have been in our program for 15, 20 years. They like to support new businesses. They do on-site visits with some of our new members, just because they want to be involved. We have a couple environmental consulting and engineering firms that work kind of pro bono with some of and offer workshops to some of our members because they want to be a part of the community. So the community aspect, I think, has been really important to the environmental leadership program and will continue to be important with the Green Business Network. Some of the new things we're offering, we are working on a formalized workshop series. When we can be in person and on site again, we'd like to start doing sustainability tours of some of our gold level members. We are formalizing a mentoring program where gold level members can opt in to be assigned a mentee. And we do performance assessments and opportunity assessments for businesses. And that's kind of just the way that we language ongoing support, right? So opportunity assessments are for new businesses who are just getting started and want to figure out what they can do. Performance assessments are for folks who are in the implementation process in some way. Maybe they've applied for bronze or silver and they want to figure out what's next. How do they continue implementation? Where do they find the funding for larger scale capital projects? That kind of stuff. And then we're also expanding to offer more resources for small businesses. We're launching a pilot equity grant program, which I know you all have been doing for a while. And we're doing direct installations as well now, which we weren't doing before. We have our assessment reports, which probably look pretty similar to the ones that are used across Boulder County. We kind of snagged your formatting and entered in our assessment, which is a bit more holistically minded. We talk about kind of purchasing and culture and training and some pieces like that, in addition to energy waste. Assessment 2 hours on site, where we provide a report afterwards, and then we have 2 check-ins post-meeting just to see where the business is at and to continue that relationship. And then, of course, there's kind of less formal ongoing support as needed with businesses. So in terms of the structure that's tied to the recognition aspect of our program, we kind of created this with a couple ideas in mind. One of them was that we wanted our recognition application to almost do double duty as a surrogate kind of strategic plan for businesses with regard to sustainability, so that they could look at our recognition application, recognize what blind spots they might have for sustainability, recognize areas that they haven't done any work in yet, and see where they can go next based on our assessment itself. So we wanted it to be available for that. We also want it to serve as kind of training wheels for businesses that are interested in more intensive third-party certificates like B Corp. So we have some B Corp questions in there. We're getting businesses tracking their data from a baseline. We're kind of helping to establish some of the language and some of the data that they'll need for those more intensive programs. So the way it's going right now is it's kind of this 2-tiered system. So we have our policy and leadership section, which is in green on the left side. And that goes over, leadership from management, whether that's policy decisions, whether that's training programs, incentives that are being offered for best practices, It does have a section on innovation projects, which are sector-specific projects. Since we're not doing sector-by-sector checklists, we're doing one holistic application. We wanted to have a section where we were catching some of those really specific projects that businesses were doing. And then some questions on community and equity. Our other pillar is resource reduction, and that covers transportation, energy, waste, purchasing, water, and we're looking at reductions from baseline via use intensity metrics, which was something that our businesses really requested. We do ask for both. We ask for total use and use intensity so that we can really see what's going on, but we're giving points based on the use intensity formulas. So that if a business moves spaces, if their production changes really significantly, they can still demonstrate commitment through the use intensity formula they're using. One thing that we do require at the state level is a compliance check with all of our environmental organizations. We don't want to be recognizing a business that we're also fining for violation of environmental policy. So we do have a compliance requirement. We do a 1-year check for bronze and silver, a 3-year check for gold, do a check every 3 years as part of the renewal process for our program. And that is something that we've done historically that we're going to continue doing, and that would be handled centrally at the state for, like, in example, regional programs. Because we're connected directly with those organizations, they're part of our department. So one thing, I didn't remember blowing this up disproportionately to the slide, but one thing that we're looking at is the Green Business Tracker software is kind of getting a revamp. It's going to look different than it does right now. This is what the new interface for Green Biz Tracker is going to look like. So it'll be a really clean interface. Businesses can go in, they register, they can see clearly which program they are interested in applying for. Third box would be for an independent regional program if there is one in the region. And then it kind of takes them through the process really nicely. It shows them which surveys they've completed, which surveys they're working on. It gives them a place to enter company info. Green Business Tracker has this really nice customer interface that will also be getting a little bit of an upgrade where folks can search for green businesses across the state and kind of search results. So really nice interface. It's going to be better than it has been. The surveys are also getting an upgrade. So the surveys are going to kind of look like this. Again, really easy to use. One question to walk through, lots of multiple choice questions. If there is data entry, there will be tables, custom tables that are laid out for a business to just enter their information into. So it's really meant to walk them through the process. It all auto saves to their account. They can go back in any time. And the fear is that a business, if they're not ready to apply for recognition, but they're wanting to at some point, they can really play around in the system. They can enter data as they get it, and they can, have access to the application until they're ready to submit it in whatever capacity they are. The other piece that we have created to make this easy is a technical manual. Every question in the application is coded with like E3 is the example on this slide. And the technical manual is designed to define the criteria, define standards and terms that we use, link to resources, and also explain the evaluation criteria that we're using so that a business can go through the technical manual, get their questions answered, and they can actually use the manual to know exactly how many points they're going to get before they get scored. There are probably a handful of questions that are more subjectively scored. The innovation projects are one of those, right? We kind of assess as the evaluators how large the project feels based on percentage of impact to their organization overall, how many people have been involved in the project, things like that. But for the most part, the questions are a really straightforward answer in terms of point value. And the main point here is that we're really sticking with a continual improvement model where we are providing technical assistance at every level that an organization could be at, and that our technical assistance changes as the organization changes. But we stay with them, and once they are a member of our community, they really get the benefit of the ongoing support from the community at large. So some of the services and support that we're offering to regional programs, I wanted to talk through quickly. So one of the things that we have started based on request from regional programs is a statewide newsletter. Essentially, regional programs can opt in, can give us their contact list, or can forward the newsletter that we send to them, to their members. And we create this statewide newsletter, right? We figured we were already doing it. A lot of regional that are strapped for resources and for FTE have trouble putting together something like this for their organizations. It's a big time commitment. So we thought we would just offer to centralize that and use our template for a statewide newsletter that goes out that has resources on upcoming events, funding opportunities, things like that for businesses, so that they can kind of stay up to date with what's available. We also are in the process of having a conversation with regional programs about what structure looks like for a governance model for a statewide program, because we do have organizations like Fort Collins is thinking about it. You know, Durango, we're in conversations with Evergreen. There are lots of municipalities that are thinking, well, if you have this program, let's just join forces. We can work as part of your program, right? But we really want to make sure there's a structure in place for that. So we're talking about, you know, what committees do we need in place? What structures do we need in place for how the application, let's say, changes over time, so that everybody has buy-in into the process. And it's not just kind of us dictating what this program looks like. It's something that truly can be collaboratively created. So in terms of what those options look like, I kind of selected 2 of the options that we have based on your overall programs, what they normally look like, and what options might make the most sense for you. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was what we've been calling like a co-branded local partner. And essentially what this looks like is that we at the state level, so the Colorado Green Business Network, would provide all of our materials, all of our operating procedures, all of our structure. We would provide, like, let's say the window decals, we'd provide our opportunity assessment reporting tool, we'd provide Green Business Tracker as a software, we'd provide the technical manual. So you would essentially become part of our Green Business Network and you'd be running our program, right? So we would give you all of the resources for that program. Your folks would also be recognized at the state. So the annual recognition event would involve all of your businesses as well as ours. But you would really manage and oversee the program. So you would be providing the technical assistance, you'd be doing the outreach to businesses. Essentially, it would be your program. You would just be using our materials to run it, if that makes sense. So you'd be doing all of the marketing and outreach. You would be facilitating training among your staff. Something we have talked about at the state level is for folks who want that, is there a way we can centralize training so that smaller green business programs where maybe they just have 1 FTE, they can come to an annual training and get trained with all of the other business specialists so that we're kind of all on the same page about how we're supporting businesses. But those are the kinds of things that are up in the air and can be collaboratively developed. So the main idea here as a takeaway is that we'd be providing all the resources and the structure. You would still be running the program. And what is outside of Green Biz Tracker, I think, is the most important aspect of a green business program, right? How the technical assistance looks, how the relationships are built, how the business feels supported in their community on a regular basis. So all of those pieces would be left to the regional program to decide how to move forward with, right? So the styling of the program is still totally up to regional design. It's just that we'd be providing those resources. The other option, which is kind of exactly where we have been, and we wanted to leave this as an option, is using Green Business Tracker to run an independent program. So if there are communities, cities that are not interested in opting into the Green Business Network structure, they can continue using Green Business Tracker. They can have their own kind of pre-designed checklists. They can do whatever they want in that system. They would still, a business when they register would still see that baseline checklist under the support option. And then they would see the regional program in the middle and then the state. So we would kind of be like a tier 2 if they wanted to apply for our program eventually, but the regional program would be recommended first in Green Business Tracker. So a business would log into Green Business Tracker and then they'd participate in your program. The only piece with that we've been underscoring is that because you'd be running a different program than us, there's not a lot that we can do to support that program, right? Because we might be doing totally different assessments. We might be looking at businesses totally differently. So what we've been underscoring, especially for folks who are looking at what direction to go in as they develop a green business program, we've been emphasizing that if this is the path that's taken, the local partner has to be able to take on and support any business that signs up in Green Business Tracker. We do have a couple businesses municipalities, like I'm going to use Evergreen as an example, that has said, well, okay, we think we can manage 5 businesses a year. We don't want to assign them Evergreen in Green Biz Tracker if they can only do 5 businesses a year, because we don't have control of how many businesses sign up. And if their program looks really different than ours, there's no way for us to take the overflow, if that makes sense. So that's just a logistical piece that we've been managing with programs. But the independent program is what I think like Longmont has been doing for a long time. So if you all wanted to keep that going, this is also an option. So that's the end of this piece. I do want to say, like, we're having a launch event for our program. I recommend, like, we have a virtual registration. Our in-person attendance is really limited, and we're trying to reserve that for new businesses. But we're going to be doing a hybrid event, and we're going to have a virtual registration as well. So if you're interested at all in the launch event and hearing more about what we're doing, in seeing our application once it goes live, which should be happening in the next couple of weeks, you are absolutely welcome to join us. But at this point, I want to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all and we can kind of have the discussion that Zach was talking about. So let's jump back into that.
Thanks so much, Raina. Really appreciate the presentation. And like I alluded earlier, this is part of an idea that was generated probably like 5 years ago or more. And so it's really exciting to see it come to this point. And it's really all about, having economies of scale and efficiencies while still preserving the local, unique aspects of each program and the local flavor. I'll open it up here in a second for conversation and discussion and questions around, what if we went for that first option, that co-branded option? I mean, the second option that Raina described is really, no change from what we're doing already in each of our programs, in Erie and Longmont, et cetera. Nothing changes. We just keep on keeping on. But that first co-branded option, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more from how PACE interacts with that, because we have, in Boulder County, we have this additional support from PACE, where most other communities do not have that level of additional support for their local programs. So I'm going to share my screen here briefly. And just really quick, if we went for the co-branded option, what changes? The businesses that participate would get simultaneous local and state level recognition. As Raina described, there are extra resources and support from the state, for the businesses and for the program. And I think that's really huge. I mean, it's definitely, it matters to us as your primary source of resources and support. I'll be honest and say that, I think you all know that we are primarily a, business advising and rebate and incentive program. And then we support, all of your green business programs as, another thing that we do. And we're very invested in that, but that's not, the core focus of our program. It is the core focus of Raina's program. And as you can hopefully tell from the slides in her presentation, there's a lot of great thought and a lot of great work has gone into the revamp of the Colorado Green Business Network. And honestly, I can just tell you, like, getting the additional support from the state means that, we'll have a higher level of service and quality of program for our businesses. Like, for example, Raina and her team have done a lot of work on the checklist and the measures that are asked to businesses. for PACE, supporting your local programs, we haven't changed them in like 4 years, I think, 5 years. It's been a while. Kind of started what we started with when we initially got Green Biz Tracker, and then only minor tweaks. So there's a lot to gain from that extra support. Something else that changes is the checklist and questions. And Matt and I went through and looked at our existing checklists that we're using across most communities, and the checklist that Raina will be using with the Colorado Green Business Network, and they're pretty similar, which is no surprise. They're Raina saw our checklist when she started to build out hers. There are some differences. I think my broad sort of assessment is the checklist and measures that Raina has put together are simultaneously more generally applicable and broad, while also more specific on details. And I'll give an example. So, we asked, one measure that's on our list currently, but isn't on Raina's is, do you use recycled paper in your copier? That is a very, our list is full of very specific, very detailed things like that. Raina's list has more general, what percent of your, and Raina, I'm kind of making this up here from memory, but so don't quote me on this, but like what percent of your, purchases are, have recycled content, things like that. Like that's kind of the difference between the two. And honestly, I like Raina's better. I think it's more applicable across more businesses, and it actually yields more detailed responses and data out of it. And part of that is, she's taking advantage of the new functionality of Green Biz Tracker that's coming. Whereas, our checklist was based off of the old functionality that was available. So I don't, there are differences in the checklist. In general, I think that there are positive differences in support of adopting Raina's checklist. Lisa Del Rey for Longmont, we might want to look at that a little bit more in terms of, the social and economic side. And maybe Raina can talk about that a little bit later too, because that, Longmont has, for everyone else, has more of a focus on economic sustainability, like financial sustainability, and social sustainability than some of the other programs do. So we can dive more into that. But I'd say for everyone else, from my perspective, it's easy to want to switch to Raina's checklist. What stays the same? Raina, correct me if I'm wrong, but even with the co-branded option, we still have the local, Lafayette Green Business logo, can be used for support the program. I see Raina nodding. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is just like from what we've thought about is like from a business consistency perspective, you'd probably want to use the Green Business Network logo and your local logo next to each other, so that because there are going to be instances like, for instance, with our state recognition program, where they'll be invited to the Green Business Network recognition program. And if they've never seen our logo before, they're going to be like, what is this and why? So that's why we're calling it co-branded, but we're super happy with you continuing to use your local branding for sure.
Great. Thanks, Raina. And then, PACE will still, under this scenario, PACE together with the state would still, help with the local administration. We'd still be the ones going out, maintaining the relationships with businesses, talking with them, following up on their applications, supporting them with rebates and incentives, all those things, as well as, continuing to host those coordinating meetings that Matt hosts monthly with most of your communities. So all that would also stay the same. So with that context, I would say that Matt and I are heavily in favor of the co-branded option. I think there's a lot to like there. I think it's a better program that takes advantage, again, of the new functionality of Green Biz Tracker. And I think it'll be better maintained, honestly, than if it's just us. And so, my recommendation would be for each of the communities to adopt this co-branded option. But I think that is very much a community by community choice, and PACE will support your decision, no matter, if you want to just keep the status quo. And, we can, of course, make changes and take advantage of the new Green Biz Tracker functionality, under the status quo arrangement too. I just think that, it seems to me that it would be in everyone's benefit to switch to this co-branded option, but very open to, each of your feelings and opinions, and we'll support you either way. And with that, I'll open it up for questions and comments on what folks are feeling.
So I see a question in the chat here from Miles. Will the checklists and questions be consistent across the state? Yes. So the idea is that we'd all have consistency there, in the same way that the checklists in Green Biz Tracker right now have kind of a core. Long term, the idea would be the same, that our checklist is the core checklist. Those questions stay the same. If we wanted to change those questions, we'd have kind of a committee for like a criteria committee, so that we could all kind of come together and talk about wording and talk about what we want to change. There is going to be a way in Green Business Tracker for you to add additional stuff on top of that. I think the trick there is, like you were saying, Miles, consistency and also scoring, right? If we're adding a ton of new questions on top of that, are we making it easier for businesses in like Boulder County to get recognized as opposed to folks in other areas? So I think there's intention that goes into that conversation, but there are going to also be ways to customize things so that if you, for instance, like you were saying about Longmont, wanted to add additional equity questions, you could do that with the survey. Also, you could add those to the entire state if, as a committee, we kind of come together and have that conversation. I am very interested in adding additional equity questions. And even since we've kind of finalized the criteria, because we just had to, I've thought of several additional questions specifically about like investment banking, 401ks, like where money is being spent and invested, that aren't in the survey right now. And I'd like to add those eventually. So I think there will be a lot of opportunity for that.
Lisa, and then Lizzie will go to your question in the chat.
Yeah, so I saw that Bernice had also dropped a comment in the chat around this. And I'm new to this. She's been running this program and has just recently stepped out. So she would have much more information. But just from the inception of our program, as Zach was saying, that equity component has been really critical, and also our program is bilingual, and so I wouldn't want to lose those components. We've also been really intentional about using sustainable business program rather than green business program, because we're trying to get people to think more comprehensively about what sustainability means. But I see a lot of benefit. I agree with what you're saying, Zach, and I was really impressed by everything you've put together. It seems really user-friendly, really comprehensive. I would probably need to think more about, and would be happy to work with you if there's an opportunity to take the work that Longmont has done around more of the triple bottom line and the economic and equity questions, and see if we can integrate those, because I think that other communities would probably be interested in that as well. And like you're saying, the benefit of some of those other communities that don't have as much staff capacity, to manage individual checklists or anything like that. And I wanted to ask the question about whether there's any plans from the state, or could be plans from the state, especially if there's other interested folks that could support this in some way, of incorporating the bilingual component as well, because I know it's not just Longmont that has a number of Spanish-speaking businesses, but those folks are across the state. And anything that we can do or have done that can help support the state's efforts and other communities, I think we'd be really interested in doing that, but also want to make sure that those pieces don't get lost for Longmont if we go this direction. I do like the ability to be able to maintain our own branding, because I think that would be important.
Yeah, so speaking to a couple of the different pieces you mentioned, because you mentioned a couple, yes, we are looking into having the site be bilingual, and I know Green Biz Tracker already actually has signed into a grant process that they're going to be using to incorporate translation services into their website. So that's something that they've already started doing. We also have talked on an ongoing basis about trying to find funding for a position that specifically has translation services written into its role. We're really careful at the state about not just like, hey, you seem to speak Spanish, let's make you do that too, right? Like we're not interested in doing that, but it is something that's really important to us. We do have translation services when we're working on that. It's been important for us to get our system created before we talk about translating it, because we needed to have the content designed. But that is something that we're going to be working on in the next couple months. And in terms of timeline for this process, I kind of see it as being like this next coming year is for development, right? So like 2023 could be when we actually kind of start to launch a more combined program. And that gives us plenty of time to work out the details for, what is our governance model look like? What kinds of committees do we need for decision making? Do we want to add additional questions to the kind of core assessment, right? I think those conversations can happen over the next year, and we can kind of work out those details. And then with the idea of being kind of up and running as more of a collective entity by 2023 for folks who want that. And that also gives us time to kind of like bug check our new system.
And Raina, for a program like Netherlands, which is just getting established, could they, join on right, next week?
Yes. For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of distinguishing between folks who have existing programs that they're tied to, right? Like you all have these community questions you're hanging on to, you want to continue using them. The way that GreenBiz Tracker currently has been updated doesn't allow for you to add stuff. So we want that functionality to be there before you jump into the program so that you can add your pieces if you want to add your pieces. Because there actually will be context in the program for you to say, like, do this checklist and these surveys. So you can keep some of that stuff. But for folks who are new, if they're comfortable with our criteria and they're just wanting to jump in and start playing around, we definitely can do that earlier. It's just waiting. The biggest thing is waiting for the software to be done, honestly. But all of our structures are already in place, and we've been really willing to just like send the technical manual, send the materials, and to do a couple site visits with new programs so that they can see what those site visits look like and how we approach them, and they can feel like they have support that way.
Great. Okay. And just remind me when I know it's an evolving deadline with the GreenBiz Tracker folks of when the software will be launched. What is the current projection?
So the current projection is end of March. That's when the new user interface will be ready. We're getting ours earlier because we're having them kind of create like a temporary interface with the current GreenBiz Tracker where they'll link to our new surveys. So again, for folks like Netherlands, if they're comfortable using kind of that temporary interface, they could do sooner than that if they wanted to. But yeah, end of March is what we've been told for the user interface. That's part of why also I'm saying like 2023 is great for a formal launch for existing programs, because they have been slower than they claim to be with GreenBiz Tracker. So we were supposed to have all this done by the end of December. So I want to give us all plenty of time so that we don't all end up in the boat that we're currently in, which is like, hey, we need that to be able to run. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. We were there when we first signed on to GreenBiz Tracker for with Lafayette. Yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
Continual, like it'll always be 3 more months. Whatever month it is, it'll always be 3 more months. Yeah.
Exactly.
They did eventually get it done, but Lizzie from Lafayette asks, some municipalities like Lafayette and Louisville have platinum level recognition. How would a co-brand work if a local business reaches platinum level, the local level, but only go at the state level?
Yeah, so to clarify the way the point systems would work is that if you did go with the co-branded model and not the independent model, you'd be using our rankings, right? Because you'd basically be adopting our checklist, our point values, and our recognition levels. We have talked about creating a platinum level because we've been careful to like ease people into the new program. And there are still a lot of points on the table for gold. Like you saw, I think it's 383 3 points or so. And I think right now we're kind of saying like gold starts at 200, 250. So there's plenty of room to create another level, which I think is a good idea once we kind of see where people are all at. But the way that would work right now is that you'd be adopting our system. So you wouldn't have a platinum level anymore. You'd be at the same gold level. If that makes sense.
And Lizzie, this might be what Lisa is raising her hand about, but the way Longmont handles this is they do a best of. So in lieu of platinum, you could do, a best of the gold or a best of, climate performance or, water efficiency or, whatever. And so rather than calling it platinum, it would be sort of that best of approach. Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, yeah. So in terms of that distinguishing, you can have additional local recognition if you want to. I think saying like gold versus platinum when we already have the gold and platinum would be confusing, but I definitely think there are other ways to recognize businesses in addition to what the state does. We also have an application for an award called an Innovation Spotlight, which is kind of meant to be similar. It's like you can get an innovation spotlight in transportation or in water. And so there's a state program for that too that would be available, right? Like your businesses could all apply to all of our stuff and you could create extra stuff for specific to your area.
So this may have spoken to that a little bit, but and also, like I said, hopefully you can forgive my somewhat ignorance because I haven't been as steeped in the details, but for those communities that have like additional community questions or checklist components, how do those then get weighted, and do those just add to the points and it still kind of gets rolled up into the overall points? Or are those totally separate and we would need to approach, as you're saying, the recognition piece separate? Because I also noticed on that one side where you were showing the two pillars, the engagement equity section was quite small compared to the rest of it. And if we had additional questions, would that help weight that component higher? Or would those kind of just get rolled up into your ranking system? Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that's something that we would have to kind of discuss and figure out among all of the programs that are wanting to participate in the program, right? So my short answer is I don't know how that would work quite, and I'm open to the idea. I think that where it gets more complicated is like if Longmont has 50 questions that they want to add and Fort Collins has 50 questions that they want to add, right? Like things can balloon very quickly. So I think there'd need to be some kind of intentional process for how we discuss doing that, which, you could see that as a downside of trying to work collaboratively as a state, right? Is that there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen to have that conversation. But I'm not opposed to the idea of there being extra questions. And I think it would be easy to tag those in some way. I just don't know if they count for extra points or if it would be, I could see that being also a different type of recognition where it's like you can get gold level and then you can also get like the equity stamp or, some extra thing if you do these extra questions in that community. So I think there are a lot of ways we could fit it in that would work fine. I also think, what I want to have is a criteria committee where we can have the conversation of, hey, everybody in the state thinks this question is a great idea. Let's just add it across the state, right? So that there's a way to do that too. The one thing I didn't mention also for the criteria is that everything that's in green, those are all weighted for every business, no matter what. The stuff that's in blue, a business can scale. So we ask a question right at the beginning that says like, rate your impact in these categories 1 to 4. And we'll give them a little bit of an extra weight to categories they say are higher impact, right? And that's just to kind of incentivize, like if we're talking to an energy company and their only water use is in toilets and sinks, they can weight their water use a little bit lower than their energy use. So we're doing that in the blue category. We haven't figured out all the details for that because we want to play with it once we start getting applications. But the green level is the same no matter what. So all those questions. So just all that to say the equity piece is required and people cannot weight that lower, right? It is what it is across industry.
Raina, Lisa asks, is there a deadline for when communities need to commit to co-branding, or is that ongoing and could jump in at any time?
Yeah, I think it'll be ongoing. I really don't want there to be any pressure tied to it, and I want it to be an evolving process. And it's also going to be a collaborative process. So like, I think folks who opt in earlier will be more a part of the design of the structure, right? What committees do we need? How does this all work? How do we figure out decision making, things like that? If you opt in later, some of those systems will already be created. But other than that, I think it's kind of an ongoing.
And Leslie asks, what are the options of using the statewide logo in local programs? Some municipalities have a certain look and aesthetic that doesn't match the statewide logo. Could businesses receive the two window decals so the local brand and the statewide brand don't clash? Or what are other options so businesses know that the local program and the state program are all inclusive?
Yeah, I think that's something we'd need to kind of talk about. So what I will say, we've had a lot of conversations with the California Green Business Network, which has been involved in this process for maybe a decade now. They're kind of ahead of us. And we've been using a lot of their learning from their creation to kind of guide what we're doing. And what they shared was that as much as local programs were resistant to using their branding, in maybe 2 years, nobody cared, because essentially like the statewide branding was just easier for businesses to recognize because they were seeing it everywhere. And so a lot of the local program branding ended up phasing out just because of utility. So I think I say that just to say, like, I think you want to think long term and short term. Like, what do you need short term in order to feel comfortable? And what is the long term utility of having two separate brands? And to be intentional about that, right? Because what we don't want to do is have the business be exceptionally confused because we really want to pull the two apart and we really want to say the two are different things. So we're mostly thinking, when we're thinking about co-branding, we're thinking from a business perspective about like what is easy for them to understand and to interact with. We don't really feel tied to like you using our branding just for the sake of getting our name out. It's much more about like, is the business going to be confused when they hear from one versus the other? So I think we could talk about that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when Rita said that California's ahead of us, they've been through this same trajectory and evolution. It was, a variety of different local programs, and then they all said, hey, we could do this more efficiently and better if we, collaborated and worked together and had common criteria across the state and didn't make miles to apply, answer, 15 different checklists in 15 different, cities. And so that's sort of the evolution there. I do think, Lizzie, that I think, as Rainey said, there's a lot of flexibility in that, and I think we can sort that out. I see a way to make it all work. And, maybe we do, our communities do end up, just using the state branding, or maybe they don't. But I don't think, it's not something that, Rainey has said in other presentations, like, she's not seeking to force this on anybody. And it's really, I think we can find ways to have them, be represented at the right points that aren't confusing, but still get the message across. The business get the benefit of both programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Lisa asks, I'm going to take these last two questions, and then I want to use the last 5 minutes just to get sort of a feedback from how folks are feeling. But Lisa asks, you mentioned the no violations check. Is that only with regards to environmental regulations?
Yeah, so it's funny. It's kind of been a moving target in our office because CDPHE is all of the regulations, and it's really easy to go down like a very deep rabbit hole of like, well, but are we talking to community offices, and what about county regulations? And like, it can get to be a lot very quickly. What we've done in the past is we basically just go to all of our regulatory groups at the state level and we say like, hey, here are the businesses we're talking about recognizing. Do you see red flags? So it's not a compliance check in the sense that like if you turned in a piece of paperwork late, you're out. It's much more a compliance check where we're saying like qualitatively, do any of these organizations have big concerns for you with regard to their environmental impact? We do have retail food as part of our organization. So like if restaurant has been shut down, right, for health concerns, that probably would also be part of the check. But again, it's not like a black or white. It's much more, are there big issues? If they have a violation, was it minor? Was it one time? Did they work really well with you when you told them about it? You know, there is a lot of gray in there for discussion. Ultimately, we just want to make sure our compliance teams are comfortable with us awarding a recognition status before we do that. So that's the biggest kind of part of that process. And I will be frank that over the years, we've had a ton of oil and gas businesses try and get recognition from us. And we've had a ton of organizations that frankly just never pass compliance checks, try to get recognition from us. And that's a big part of the reason it was important to us to keep that. Because if an organization is being regularly fined for, let's say, hazardous waste dumping, we're not going to give them an award. It doesn't matter how many trees they've planted that year. They're still not in compliance, like baseline doing the right thing compliance. So that's the main reason for the check.
Yeah. Michelle, sorry, we're going to have to follow up on your question. I just want to, maybe folks could put in the chat, you know, from, you know, Lisa, Lizzie, Tyler, you know, everyone really, what's your sort of feeling like? Do you think you want to move towards adopting the co-branded model? Do you want to stick with, you know, the status quo and keep investing and working down the path we have been? I think there is, you know, as Raina said, there's no deadline to joining. From a process standpoint, it would be nice to your partners at PACE if a bunch of folks went all at once instead of like, you know, every month we onboard somebody, you know, a different community. So what are folks feeling? Just sort of gut check. And feel free to just speak up or put it in the chat.
Zach, this is Bernice speaking from Latino Chamber. If we want more Latino businesses to be engaged in these programs, we really need to keep the bilingual component, have the equity questions, especially if there are labor violations like Lisa is saying. I mean, we should not give them like a gold medal or silver. They should have bronze or something like that. And it was very helpful how Longmont has managed it for, you know, for the Latino Chamber. So if we can keep those essential components, I will also recommend to adopt the state, but as long as we keep the equity and the bilingual component. But I'm not a municipality here, so I'm just a nonprofit, but that will help us a lot. And I think, Reina, you said that the Greenpeace tracker system might be in Spanish as well in the future, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And one thing I didn't mention as well that might put a little bit of that at ease, I'm hearing the piece about the equity questions, is that we do site verification visits for gold and silver applications before we certify them. So we do the compliance check, but we also do an on-site verification. And I think that is where, like you're saying about labor laws and some of that stuff, if you're seeing practices in place on verification visit that raise big red flags for you, that's where that can come. So I think there are places we can kind of integrate that into the process based on recommendations from the group.
Lizzie, Lucas, Pat, what are you thinking?
I can jump in. This is Lizzie from Lafayette. I am interested in participating in the conversation. I think there's some things that we just need to figure out. We're in the process of rebranding right now. So we just have to figure out how to co-brand with the state. And that's really the only piece that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, understood. I think we can figure that out, but understood.
This is Luke with Town of Erie. I think we'd be pretty interested in participating as well. Yeah, I think Erie is still kind of in its infant stages where we can mold what system we do use to meet our needs for the town. I'll let Pat and I don't know if Tyler joined too, comment on that, but I think just the additional resources and functionality of it will be a benefit to the town.
Yeah, I agree with Lucas. It's just getting more information and how to get it out, and I will work with the town to see what we can do.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'd love to keep talking about this for another hour, but I know we're at time. So I'll say that, Matt and I will follow up with each of your communities individually in our, regular standing meetings, and can sort out some of the detailed questions that everyone has. But I'm excited that it seems like there's general interest and desire to move forward, and we just need to figure out make sure all the details work out. So thank you, Raina. Thanks, everyone. I'm super excited about this. I think it's just going to be, just a real value add for the businesses, and having the integration with the state, it's going to make all of our lives a lot easier in the administration of these programs as well. So, yeah, I think this is all really great. So, thank you again, Raina, and thanks everyone. We'll be in touch.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, everyone.